France is our oldest ally. I want the people of France to know that the United States stands with you today, stands with you tomorrow. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families who've been directly impacted. We grieve with you. We fight alongside you to uphold our values, the values that we share, universal values that bind us together as friends and as allies.
President Obama stating he's got allegiance to France, but he didn't go to France. Vice President Kerry didn't go to, or Secretary of State Kerry didn't go to France. Biden didn't go to France. The Attorney General was supposed to. He got replaced by the ambassador. I wonder how much the Americans really care about what's happening in the French terror activity or around the world, even as they say they want to host a summit on terrorism and how to deal with it. Robert Spencer is the director of Jihad Watch, and he joins us now via Skype. Robert, what do you think? The Americans supportive of France?
Yeah, from a great distance. I mean, after all, Manuel Valls, the Prime Minister of France, said yesterday that France was at war with jihadism and radical Islam, which was an extraordinary break from the politically correct line that all Western leaders have followed, that jihad terrorism has nothing to do with Islam. And when asked if he agreed with this and that the U.S. was also at war with jihadism and radical Islam, Eric Holder, the outgoing Attorney General, temporized and said that the U.S. is at war with those who corrupt the Islamic State. And that's showing that he's going to keep up the politically correct denial about the fact that jihadis use the texts and teachings of Islam to justify what they're doing and make recruits among Muslims. And unless and until we confront that fact, we're never going to be able to counter it.
Okay, so now we're going to have a summit sponsored by President Obama on February the 18th, I think is the date that's been bandied around. Wasn't this the summit that was supposed to take place back in the fall?
Yes, it was postponed, apparently out of some concern that it would hurt the Democrats' chances in the elections. And now that that's all done with, it's on again. It's a summit on countering violent extremism. And so note here again the denial. Violent extremism is an absolutely null term. Extreme in what? What if you're extremely fond of TV sitcoms? It's just a meaningless phrase that points up the fact that the United States government under Barack Obama will not say that the people who are fighting against us are Muslims waging jihad in the cause of Islam in order to impose Islamic law over the world. There may be millions of Muslims, there are millions of Muslims who are not fighting this, who are not on board with it, but that does not change the fact that this is the belief system, this is the ideology that these people are using, and that we're going to counter it. We have to at least acknowledge what it is. So this is just going to be an absurd, pointless, and fruitless exercise.
Well, except that the practical reality is that people have to deal with this on an ongoing basis, Robert. You look at the cities of Boston, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, St. Paul, they have these countering violent extremism, CVE programs in place, which look at religion as well as law enforcement, but also include mental health and other areas. What do you make of these more grassroots efforts?
Well, I would say that without hesitation, that they are absolutely and 100% ineffective. They're just window dressing. They're just an attempt to show the public, the voting public, that something is being done to counter this threat. But you take Minneapolis in particular, and you have hundreds of young Muslims from Minneapolis going first to Somalia to wage jihad, and then now to Iraq and Syria to wage jihad. And these CVE programs have been absolutely powerless to stop even one from going over there. They are not dealing with the problem as it really stands because they don't dare address the fact that these young Muslims are going over to Iraq and Syria and Somalia because they believe in certain principles that are founded in the Islamic religion, and the CVE doesn't dare go into that.
Yeah, good point. Okay, now switching back to France, if we could, then. You've got the head of Islamic thought in France indicating that there's got to be a separation, an abandonment of the political Islam. They're trying to separate the Muslim community, trying to separate the religion from the political components. What do you make of that kind of a statement coming from a Muslim leader?
I applaud that. I applaud that wholeheartedly. That's what we need to see. We need to see the Muslims in the West saying that the aspects of the Islam's political system, which are authoritarian, supremacist, and deny basic rights to women and non-Muslims, and other groups as well, have to be discarded by the Muslims in the West in a sincere, honest, ongoing, transparent, and inspectable manner. And that only by means of their abandoning those aspects of Islam and definitively renouncing them and teaching against them in mosques and Islamic schools will it be possible for Muslims in the aggregate to join into the whole fabric of the society in France, in Western Europe, in Canada, and the U.S., including the ideas of the freedom of speech and the equality of rights of all citizens before the law. Now, that's going to be an uphill battle. It's good to hear them saying that because most of the time they deny that there's even a problem. But it's at least the beginning if they're saying that this needs to be done, because it is what needs to be done. It's going to be very difficult because these things are rooted in Islamic texts and teaching. They're going to get a lot of resistance from Muslims who are well aware that they're rooted in Islamic texts and teaching.
Well, and some of those teachings are confused. I mean, for instance, the visualization of Muhammad being illegal, if you will, in the Muslim belief, that's a relatively recent phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was mostly Shiites who ever pictured Muhammad. Sunnis generally never did. And it's the same kind of thing that divides Sunnis and Shiites, where Sunnis have shrines to saints and holy men, and Shiites, rather, have shrines to saints and holy men, whereas hardline Sunnis generally eschew that sort of thing and think it's idolatry. And it's the same thing here. A Shiite might draw Muhammad, and a Sunni would think that idolatry. But the problem here is not really depicting Muhammad. The problem is mocking Muhammad. The problem is that's blasphemy, and blasphemy has the death penalty for Islam in all sects and schools of Islamic law. And so to say that there should not be a death penalty for blasphemy, that's what we need to see. But we're not seeing that from any Muslim group.
No, and in fact, you know, offensive humor, and that's what was branded by this magazine, offensive humor can be very useful as a satirical tool to change sentiment. Do we anticipate that we'll see more of that?
I hope we see more of that. It's not about precisely mocking religious figures. It's about showing that in a free society where people differ on large questions, we have to be able to tolerate each other. We have to be able to tolerate being offended without resorting to violence in response. And that point has to be made now, or the freedom of speech and free society itself will be lost.
You know, it's interesting, Robert. In France, it's mandated that the niqab is not allowed, for instance, because it hides the face and those kinds of things. In support, do you think you could see a Western movement that would voluntarily remove the niqab?
Voluntarily remove it? You mean some sort of a Muslim group that said we're not going to wear the niqab?
Yeah, exactly. And that would speak to them being respectful and tolerant.
It would be a most welcome development were such a group to come to exist, but none exists like that right now.
Do you think it could come to pass, though, in light of the events today, especially in light that it's already in France, they don't have to wear them?
Anything can happen in the future, and I would never say that anything is impossible. But right now, most of the Muslim groups in the West are calling for restrictions on the freedom of speech, like your own imam in Canada, Imtiaz Ahmed, saying that cartoons of religious figures ought to be outlawed. That's the kind of thing we're seeing from Muslim groups in the wake of this attack. And that's a very unfortunate thing, but not unexpected.
Yeah, good point, Robert. Okay, so now then back to the summit. I guess your point is nothing will be accomplished until we acknowledge that this is the division we need to talk about. Yes,
exactly. And the idea that political Islam has to be restricted and how to restrict it while maintaining constitutional freedom. That's the kind of summit he ought to be having. But I guarantee you 100%, without seeing the agenda or knowing anything about what they're going to discuss, that's one thing they're not going to discuss. And I wouldn't be surprised if the word Islam is never even mentioned during the whole of this conference.
Yeah, so you think that they'll talk about security measures and increased cooperation and that kind of messaging?
Precisely, in cooperation with local communities, which means in making sure that counterterror measures don't offend the local Muslims and that the imams have no objection to them, which means no monitoring of mosques, no going into mosques, and essentially letting them have carte blanche.
What about the measures, and we know that in France already in force are a separate judicial effort, if you will, to counter terrorism. We know in Canada that that's being drawn up, you know, and presumably it will address some of the issues you and I are talking about. Is the same issue going to come up at this summit, and is it a priority for the Americans?
I don't know that it's a priority for the Americans. I think that what Obama primarily wants to do with this summit is show that he's doing something. That's the main point of the summit. The way the summit is framed ensures that it's not going to accomplish anything. So it's just political window dressing.
Is it an opportunity, though, for Congress, freshly Republican-led, I'll point out, to lead the way in this dialogue?
That would be a nice development as well. But freshly Republican-led Congress so far has stumbled out of the gate and not shown that it has the will to stand up to Obama's initiatives. And so, you know, it's just the same thing, that when it comes to being unwilling to discuss the root causes of the problem of jihad terrorism and realistic measures to limit it, the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats. And so I don't have high hopes for the newly Republican-led Congress. But here again, you know, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I never expected, for instance, to see Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas together at the forefront of an issue. So you can have surprises.
Well, you know, France didn't want Netanyahu to come. And when they found out that he was going to come, they said, if you come, we're going to bring Mahmoud Abbas as well. And he said, well, you know, do what you're going to do. I'm going to be there. And so really it was just kind of a diplomatic flat insult by France to bring Abbas there to get back at Netanyahu. Now, why they're hostile to Netanyahu when Manuel Valls is saying we're fighting against jihadism and radical Islam, which is exactly the threat that Netanyahu in Israel is facing and that is fronted by Mahmoud Abbas, it just shows that even though Manuel Valls said that, the French still don't have much of a clue as to what they're dealing with.
So you think it's a really bad idea that they both showed up at the same spot, even though it might sway some people to take the political rhetoric, the anti-Zionist rhetoric, out of the discussion?
Well, that would be nice if that were to happen, but I think it just obscures the issue. Mahmoud Abbas was there to give himself a cloak of respectability, when if you look at what he says and what his group, particularly the Fatah movement, which he is the head of, say about killing all the Jews, waging jihad against Israel, and so on, and celebrating the jihad attacks against Israeli civilians. When he shows up at a site where jihadis had killed 12 people and then they went and killed 4 Jews in a kosher supermarket, it's hard to think that he's really on the side of those who are against that, when that's the kind of rhetoric, encouraging that kind of thing, that he allows to be spread all over the areas that he controls.
Robert, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Spencer joining us, Director of Jihad Watch.